What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today, guys, we're going to be going over 3 controversial exercises, being the behind the neck shoulder press, behind the neck lat pull downs, and then decline bench press. Now, basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going over why each of these exercises is controversial, kind of the whole risk and reward of each exercise, and then based off of actual research, studies, and experience, explaining which ones I believe are worth doing and which ones are not worth doing. Now, each exercise we go over is going to be time-stamped in the description down below. That way, if there's some of you where you're like, oh, I don't even use this exercise, so I don't care, you can just fast forward to the exercises that you do want to hear about. Or if you're someone who's closed-minded and you're like, well, no matter what research or evidence he shows me, I made my mind about this exercise, then you can fast forward once again. Now, I already know after I go over these, somebody's gonna be asking about, well, what about crunches, man? There's a lot of controversy and debate back and forth over are crunches good for you, bad for you. I'm gonna dedicate an entire video to that topic just because there's a lot that goes into it, but I'm gonna just go ahead and let you guys know in advance that no, I feel like the whole oh, crunches bad for you thing has been based off a lot of, unfortunately, cherry-picked studies, extreme studies, and meaning studies that aren't even applicable, like real-life applications. Like, for example, studies where they have you going through thousands of cycles of crunches where nobody does that in a day. Like, most people do like sets of like, 10 to 20 and move on. Basically, that needs its own video. So I'm going to be going over like the importance of not cherry-picking studies, the importance of understanding the studies you're looking at, and the importance of not being someone who like considers, oh, I read a couple articles on this and that's research, helping you guys understand what actual research is. So that's going to be a video all on its own. But anyway, let's get into these 3 movements. So starting off is behind the neck military press, also known as behind the neck barbell shoulder press. Now, the controversy with this, or like the whole risk versus reward thing, is that, oh, it's bad for your overall shoulder health. It's gonna cause like, shoulder impingement, it's gonna cause issues, it's in the danger zone for lifting, things like that. These basic things that we kind of go over, if you're getting a degree in kinesiology, if you're getting certified as a personal trainer, you'll go over different things like danger zones, risk versus reward movements, etc. And basically, guys, that's kind of like the risk is like, possible shoulder impingements, shoulder issues, and the reward is the fact that out of any type of shoulder press, meaning any type of front shoulder press, like barbell overhead press, whether you're standing or seated, dumbbell shoulder press, and then of course behind the neck press. Behind the neck presses, without a doubt, this is not up for debate, it's not for discussion. Any competent person who's researched this or has looked at the studies behind this, any exercise physiologist knows and understands this, is that it is the movement that best stimulates all 3 heads at the same time, period. Meaning, as far as the front, the lateral, and rear head of your delts, behind the neck press is the one that stimulates all 3 the most. You get the most overall delt activation in terms of your pressing motions when you do behind the neck presses. So the reward is pretty good. The problem is people talk about like the risk, but here's the reality, guys. The risk is minimum to non-existent unless you're one of 2 types of people: somebody who has shoulder mobility issues, or someone who deals with kyphosis, which basically means you have like a rounded upper back and hunched shoulder. So if you're someone with the hunchback, and here's the thing, guys, if you're someone who deals with shoulder mobility issues, or you deal like with poor posture because you're hunched over, those are things you need to address already. So behind the neck presses, the movement in of itself is not a problem, it's not an issue. The issue is that people don't address these other underlying issues, and that behind the neck shoulder press is pretty much a diagnostic tool of showing, hey, you have these shoulder issues. So because of that, people will like demonize and be like, oh, it's just a bad movement because I can't perform without pain, instead of looking at why you can't perform without pain. It's no different than the person who is doing something reckless and destroying their knees, and then they can't squat properly, so then they blame squats for their knees hurting, when we all know that squats are actually very good for the knees. Deadlifts are great for your back. Bench press is great for your shoulder health when all these are done and performed correctly. You can't have underlying issues in another area and then try to blame it on something else, and that's oftentimes what people do. And another thing that you guys have to understand with each of these moves I'm going over is that a lot of these information about like, oh, well, so-and-so says this is bad, so-and-so this is bad, a lot of that comes from physical therapists. And what you have to understand is a lot of physical therapists aren't like Athlete X, for those of you who know what Athlete X is. A lot of physical therapists don't deal with a lot of athletes or people who are strong and functional. They deal with a lot of just general population. The reality is most people in general population have posture issues, have shoulder mobility issues, have all types of issues. So they base what they say based off things they're doing for like prehab and rehab, and more often than not, it's really just rehab more so than prehab. That's what they're doing. They're rehabilitating people that have these issues and telling them, hey, stay away from this. But you can't take that and just apply it to everyone. You can't take like, a special population that has certain issues and apply it to everyone, like the general population. Or you can't take what applies to the general population, people who don't lift, and apply it to those of us who do lift, who do have good posture, who do work on form mobility and stuff like that. Because the reality is, guys, that so long as you're using proper form, so long as you have no shoulder mobility issues and you don't deal with kyphosis, like you're not rounded or hunched over, you shouldn't have any issues performing behind the neck military press. Now, is it a necessity? Do you have to perform the movement? Absolutely not. Like if you were someone who rather, hey, I'm just gonna do like, you know, dumbbell shoulder press or traditional barbell overhead press, and I'll make sure I do my lateral raise work, my row delt work, you can still develop your shoulders fine. But the point is, if you want to do a pressing movement that gives you a little bit more bang for your buck as far as total muscle activation in all heads of your delts, then there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's just making sure that you're doing it correctly, making sure that you're not doing more weight than you can handle, the same way you do with any other movement. Make sure that you're gradually, steadily, progressively overloading. But yeah, the argument that it's like it's just dangerous for everyone, period, simply is not true based off all available research. And as usual, guys, I'll have a few links down below that you can read over. Some of them will talk about more than just like the shoulder stuff. We'll go over like 5 different points, things like that, but that's okay. You can still like find the parts related to the movements that we're talking about. But yeah, that's pretty much my standpoint on behind the neck presses. If you don't deal with any of the 2 issues that I mentioned, being, you know, kyphosis or shoulder mobility issues, you should have no issues with performing the movement. And sometimes the only way you'll know is like test the movement out with, you know, just the bar, some lightweight, see how it feels. And if you feel that you have certain issues, then you need to go address those issues before incorporating the movement into your training. So that's movement number 1. All right, guys, so the second move we're gonna be going over is behind the neck lat pull downs. And this can also kind of apply to behind the neck pull-ups, pretty much any type of behind the neck pull motion. Now, a lot of the concerns and issues as far as the risk with this movement are the same with behind the neck presses. The difference being, guys, that you have to understand that, so behind the neck pulls, really any type of cable pull, has to do with traction, which basically, like, I'm not gonna get too much into the details, you know, I'm trying to be scientific but keep it simple for you guys, but basically involves, traction is basically where the head of the humerus is pulled away from the glenoid fossa, right? Whereas any type of, like, a lot of various presses, like behind the neck presses, involve approximation, where it drives the humerus further into the socket, and that's where a lot of impingement comes from. Like, if you guys remember when I talked about, like, when you're doing lateral raises and you twist your pinky up, it can cause impingement because of things going on with your glenoid fossa. Well, if that being the case, basically on paper, if a behind the neck pull kind of drives the head of the humerus away from the glenoid, less chance of impingement than, you know, a press which drives the head of the humerus like into the socket, right? On paper, that makes sense. On paper, that's how it goes. But here's the problem, guys. Like I said, I explained already that with behind the neck presses, how you can go about doing that safely, so long as you don't have like the 2 issues we went over. But the problem with behind the neck pull downs is, even though there's not as much risk for things like, you know, shoulder impingements, messing with your spine, bruising the neck, things like that, the risk is still there. And unlike the seated military press with behind the neck lat pull downs, the reward is garbage. And what I mean by that is, with any type of comparison of, you know, behind the neck pull down or behind the neck pull up versus, you know, doing a traditional pull down to your chest or a traditional pull up where you bring your chest to the bar, it's a shorter range of motion. So whenever you're doing behind the neck pull downs, you're shortening the range of motion, you're shortening the total workload that your muscles are doing. Therefore, you're not gonna stimulate as much muscle activation or get anywhere near as much muscle growth from doing behind the neck pull downs as you would a traditional pull down. So it's almost like, okay, so we have almost, not quite to the same degree, but about the same amount of risk as far as, you know, shoulder issues and shoulder mobility issues as we do with behind the neck presses. But unlike with behind the neck presses, where we're getting a lot of benefits as far as, hey, if you can do this movement, you get a lot of muscular benefits, you're taking away the benefits in this case, versus where if you just do it the traditional way, you know, you get the benefits and you're not putting yourself at greater risk of injury. So why would you even want to do behind the neck lat pull downs? Now, I already know, well, so-and-so does this, so-and-so does that. Once again, what's our favorite saying here, guys? I don't care what your favorite YouTuber says. It's not to say that your favorite YouTuber, whoever you like watching, whoever does this movement, doesn't know what they're talking about in all aspects, but it simply shows that they're ignorant of the fact that you aren't getting any real benefits from doing behind the neck pull downs. You're getting a lot of possible risk factors, but there's no benefits. Like I said, you're taking away from the benefit of a traditional lat pull down or pull up, where you're getting a full range of motion on the muscles involved. So there's really no reason to do it. So in this case, it's one of those things where, and keep in mind, guys, with all these movements, you can do whatever you want, but once again, that risk versus reward. In this case, the risk is much higher than the reward, because the reward is higher for just a normal lat pull down. So it's kind of like, okay, behind the neck, greater risk, less reward. If I do it the traditional way, good reward, less risk. So it's kind of obvious what you should go with. So for that reason, I don't think there's any reason to incorporate any type of behind the neck lat pull downs or pull ups into your routines. If you guys want to continue to do so, go for it, but just understand that you're really just shortchanging your muscles because they're doing less total work and you're just increasing your risk of injury. All right guys, and the third and final move we're going to be talking about is decline bench press. Now this one's a little bit different because it's not a controversial movement in terms of like risk and reward. Like most people don't think, oh, decline bench press puts you in such a crazy compromisable position, like it's such a dangerous movement. Not at all. It's more about the fact of, is it a useful movement or not? Is there a point in doing the movement? So the first thing that I'm going to say, once again, this is not up for debate, is that if you are someone who is able to perform dips, able to perform weighted dips, you can do so through a full range of motion, you don't have any issues as far as your anatomical build to where it causes you any sternum pain or rib cage pain, then there is absolutely zero reason for you to ever do decline bench press over weighted dips. Just because regardless of how much you think you feel the movement, your muscles, your chest, especially like the lower, like your chest, mind you, that's something else you have to keep in mind when we talk about decline, incline, flat weighted dips. That guys, when your chest is working, the entire thing is working. You cannot separate the upper pecs from the lower pecs, from the inner pecs. Like your entire chest works together. Certain angles may target certain fibers in one area of it a little bit more, but the entire chest is working. So the reality is though, guys, is that your chest as a whole, especially the lower pecs, are doing more total workload when you're doing a weighted dip versus when you're doing a decline bench press, for the mere fact that, once again, the range of motion is longer, and just due to the positioning your body is in, your chest is forced to do more total work to get you back up into position, whether you're doing like body weight or weighted dips, than what you do on a decline bench press. So if you're able to do weighted dips, there's absolutely really no reason for you to even need to incorporate decline bench press. Now, what if you're someone who's not able to do weighted dips because of how you're anatomically built, it causes you sternum issues or something like that? Well, in that case, then you have to ask, okay, well, are you already doing flat bench press, incline bench press? Because if you are, there's honest to God, once again, no real reason to incorporate decline. Why? Once again, our entire chest is already working. The amount of work that you're getting on flat bench press is more than enough to develop your lower pecs. Now, people tend to want to use the argument of like, okay, but on decline, I can load more weight than on flat. So since I can load more weight, then I'm doing more total work, right? So that means it's better than flat bench press. But what you guys have to keep in mind and understand is that it's a shorter range of motion. Of course you can move more weight on decline bench press because it's a shorter range of motion. Plus, due to the position you're in, it's a little bit easier to press up. Think about it. In the same way that power lifters, right? They'll widen their grip and then use a huge excessive arch. What does that arch basically do? It basically changes the flat bench press into a decline press. So they're able to lift more weight. Why? Because it's a shorter range of motion. As I've explained on this channel, guys, yes, progressive overload is important. Gradually adding more reps, gradually adding more weight, or more sets, increasing your total workload. And over time, yes, you need to be adding weight to the bar if you're trying to get stronger and trying to grow muscle. And you guys know I'm all about that. But what do I always say? Progressive overload always has to keep in mind proper form. If you're doing dumbbell shoulder press, you're coming all the way down and all the way up, all the way down and all the way up. But as the weight gets heavier, you stop going from all the way down, all the way up to where you're just doing this. Yeah, you're lifting more weight, but you cut the range of motion in half, so you're not doing as much total workload. In order for progressive overload to apply, you have to be performing the same movement. Like in the same way that you can't be like, oh, hey, look, I'm bench pressing all the way down and all the way up. Oh, I added weight. Now I'm not even touching my chest. I'm coming halfway down and back up. But I added weight, progressively overloaded, right? No, because you're no longer doing the same movement. You're doing a partial rep. You're doing a partial version of the entire movement you were doing previously. So with that being in mind, that's the only reason why you can lift more weight on the decline bench press, but it does not necessarily make it superior for the flat bench. And then something else that we have to keep in mind, guys, is that when we look at a lot of studies of research, we often find that based off how you're built, even though you may not have any like issues as far as pain with decline bench press, you may not be working your lower pecs as much as you think. Due to the size of certain people's rib cages, we find that there's not really as much lower pec activation in the decline bench press versus the flat for certain individuals. Whereas for every individual across the board, assuming you're performing the exercise correctly, you have the the proper hand placement for your build, you're retracting your scapula, you're using a full range of motion going all the way down, all the way up, not just doing crazy bounces, but you're doing like a proper touch and go, with like a nice brief pause, or you're doing full on pause reps, that the muscle activation of your chest is there. And I've already discussed this when I did my video over like 3 tips or how many tips it was to help you develop your chest. I talked about the importance of bench pressing correctly for muscle growth. So that's what you guys have to keep in mind. So it's not that to say that you can't do decline or that you shouldn't do decline, but it's the fact that if you're already doing weighted dips, if you're already doing incline, if you're already doing flat, then there's really no need to. If anything, if you're already doing like weighted dips, incline and flat, and you want to throw something else in there for extra volume, I would consider throwing in some type of dumbbell press. Like do a flat dumbbell press. Why? Well, because it's going to be a longer range of motion than a barbell, right? Because a barbell is going to stop on your chest. With the dumbbells, assuming you're not coming out like this and you're actually coming down the way you're supposed to, nice and tucked, getting a full range of motion, then that's going to be great for extra, you know, chest volume, extra chest development. Because that's the thing, a lot of people will do decline kind of just to get some extra volume in, like, oh, I might as well target on my lower pecs, but you're going to get a lot more benefits from doing some type of, you know, flat dumbbell press versus like just a decline bench barbell press. And then if you say, oh, well, then should I just do decline dumbbell press? Well, that's still superior to decline barbell just because it's a long range of motion, but in the same way, doing just a flat dumbbell is a long range of motion than doing a decline dumbbell. So that's my advice as far as the decline bench press. There's not really any huge risk with it in terms of like hurting yourself so long as you're doing it correctly, but it's just really not worth doing when there's so many superior movements for overall chest development. All right, guys, so that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative. Like I said, I will eventually be doing a similar video style over, you know, the abs, talking about crunches, sit-ups, talking about the difference between having like, you know, a strong core and then a developed abs, because there is a difference. Like, you know, a lot of people say like, hey, so long as you're doing your heavy compounds, you know, your core is fine. Yes, your overall core strength will be there, but it's not the same thing as people who maybe want, you know, muscularly developed abs. So I'll be talking about all that whenever I do that video. And just so you guys know, these type of informative video guys aren't going anywhere. Even though, yes, I am doing the Time to Build series, I'm trying to, you know, maybe do like, you know, 1 to 2 of those videos a week. The focus will always be videos like this, will always be that direct informative content where you can just come, get the information you need, and go on about your day. You don't have to watch me go to like the workouts or anything like that. I know a lot of you enjoy it, but for those of you where you're like, hey, I subscribe to this guy to get that good, high quality, informative content without all the extra BS, these videos will always be here. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you did not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.